Okay, welcome to BAPT Conference 2021. This is Saturday, day 3, getting later in the day here in the UK. And it's a pleasure to welcome Sterling Bates. He's been a speaker at previous conferences. There's been a lot of talk around type objections and criticisms in this conference, so it's going to be exciting to hear what Sterling has to add on that topic. So thank you very much, Sterling.
You're welcome. Great. Well, great to see everyone here. And I look forward to the days when we can see each other in person, as I greatly enjoy traveling. So I am thrilled to travel wherever I can to do conferences. So we're going to talk about several different things. I'm going to let you know I do talk fast. So if you do want me to slow down a little bit, let me know. Or if you have a question, go ahead and use those raise hand, and I'll try to pause and we can address those. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover what kinds of objections I'm talking about today. The 2 key secrets to solving, I think, almost objections. Then some specific actionable tips and tricks you can take away to work with people who object to things. And then we're going to do a little bit more practice with the 2 key secrets. And then finally, a conclusion. And at the end of the conclusion, I have a bonus for you here as the participants. First of all, of course, I will be making the slides and links available afterwards. So if you need to go through this again, there'll be both the video and the slides. So if you want to refer to something, you don't have to furiously scribble notes. They're available. So what kinds of objections am I talking about here? So really, I'm talking about man on the street objections, the kind of objections that somebody says, especially when people are first introduced to type. So when I say type here, I'm referring to regardless of the model, like interaction styles, essential motivators, temperament, union functions, any of them I'm referring to broadly as a psychological typing model. So, and then these are the kinds of objections you get when doing type facilitations with a group, or when you're just starting to talk with somebody about type who maybe is a friend. So basically, we're talking now objections to the model or the philosophy of type. What we're not talking about is what a psychologist or researcher objects to. If you wanted that, you should have attended Richard's talk earlier in the conference, where he spent more time talking about that. So we're not referring to that. I'm also referring not to objections to the assessment methodology, like the MBTI specifically. There's already great material on this with some of my favorites, some great articles by Roger Pearman. You can go look them up. He's posted them through a lot of the APT groups. There's a lot of other great articles that refer to the objections to the assessment methodology. So I'm not referring to either of those kinds of objections. So we're going to do an activity. So everyone hopefully have a piece of paper and a pen or a note, something you can scribble with. I'm going to give you, when I say go, don't start yet. When I say go, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to write down as many objections as you can. Start with ones you have heard before, ideally, but focus on quantity rather than quality. As many objections as you can. All right, so I'm going to hope everyone now has something to write with and is ready to go. And I'm going to say start now. 60 seconds. As many objections as you can to type. Anybody who's joining at the last second, you're writing down as many objections as you possibly can. "30 seconds. And go ahead and stop. I love these kinds of exercises. You're like 60 seconds is no time at all. And then you get like, you dump the first few out of the brain and then your brain starts going, oh, wait, this now seems like a long time. All right, so now I'm going to give you some of the ones that I am going to focus on as some of my favorites. We're going to get back to your list in just a second. But first, we're going to start a poll. So Richard, if you could pop up poll 1. And here I want you to think with this poll and choose which of the following objections you see most frequently, the most common objections you hear. How are we doing on responses, Richard?
Okay, so we're 93% have voted. I think we're ready to go. I'll end
All right, great. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Yep. Don't put me in a box. Don't stereotype me. A lot of those. I think I am both, or I'm an ambivert, now being number second. And it's just astrology, or the bottom effect being third. Yep. So there's some great there. And we're going to get to the others in just a moment. All right. So now we're going to flip this around, and I'm going to ask the same set of objections, but from a different perspective. And that is, we now want to know which is most frustrating to deal with. So Richard, if you pop up that second poll, we're going to look at the same list, but now you want to talk about which one is most frustrating.
Everyone, 45% of people, 50, 60, 75, 80, 90%. I'll give it a few more seconds. 90% have voted now. 93.
Great.
A few more seconds. 96. Right, last chance to go. We're ending it now.
There we go. Yeah, now we get a little bit more interesting spread. So yeah, there you go. It's just astrology, the Barnum effects coming in at number one with a short coming in second there. That doesn't help me. Type doesn't matter. Yep. I would agree with that, definitely. All right, so now what you can do is I want you to look over the list you created earlier. And I want you to find an objection on your own list that wasn't in the poll that you find annoying, that you don't like that objection, frustrating. And then you don't have to write anything, but I'm going to give everyone a couple of minutes to write into the Zoom chat window so everyone can see it in the list. So this is an objection you just find really annoying that was not in our list. Okay, yeah, irrelevant to business outcomes, not based on science. Oh, there is no data. Oh, that one hurts. It's inaccurate. Humans, not robots. It's too complicated. Oh yeah, no science. Oh, this was created by two housewives. Oh, too simple. I took it 3 years ago and don't remember my type. We change every time we take it, me at home or me at work. Billions of people, 16 types, yes. Oh, it's immoral. Oh, that one. Not valued, culturally loaded. Oh yeah. These are a lot of great objections. Entertainment at best. Yep, yep. So we're not fixed. That's a great list. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to a little bit. So I'm now gonna give you what I think of as my top 2 secrets for answering most objections. This isn't gonna necessarily answer all of them, but it will typically cover most of them. And so here's my 2 secrets. I'm going to give you the secrets in advance, and then I'll give you specific ways in which you can use them. So first, my 2 secrets come from an important underlying philosophy. And this is my underlying philosophy, is I think all of these objections secretly have one cause. One easy cause. Although the tricky part is not easy to solve. They don't know enough about type yet. I love type. I studied extensively. I'm as excited about it. There's lots of things I know. And so many of these objections I hear, it's like, oh, I'm thinking to myself, if only you knew a little bit more about type, you wouldn't have that as an objection. So that's secretly one of the underlying reasons I think that a lot of these occur. And you can hear that in some of our answers from the experts in our community and some of our talks, is that there are clear answers to these objections. People just don't know them. So my first real secret is to address objections before they come up. This is massive. It turns out when you bring up the objection first, it gives you the power to frame the discussion. And it makes you seem like the expert. So I'm not a fan of hiding the objections, right? Like never mentioning, never bringing them up. I think that's actually the wrong strategy. I think it's way better for you to control the discussion and to frame it by bringing up the objection first. And I think that gives you lots of power. Alternatively, you can present everything so the objection never occurs. So something about how you present itself prevents it from occurring in the first place. Warning, I'm going to let you know I've practiced this a lot. It is not easy. I will let you know this is a great objective, but it's hard to do well. And it's often difficult to get whatever it is early enough that you're trying to teach them about type early enough in the process that the objection never comes up. But that is the other way to go about that. Now, my second big tip, focus on the core benefits. And by that, I mean, you can often get people to stop thinking or approaching the objections if they're thinking about the benefits. And what I'm referring to there is really the principles behind gifts differing. Or another way to say it, I'm not crazy, I'm just not you. Or, as Richard Ord pointed out, go back to Jung's philosophy, that people have attitudes. Basically, if you can get people to, I have one way of doing things and you have a different way. That basic idea of differences are okay is a massive benefit and a major paradigm that sometimes people need to reach. So this core idea for many people is transformational. Oh, my coworkers are not doing that thing because they hate me. It's probably just because they have their own approach, making it not personal. And this can actually be massively transformational. And another way to frame this is yours and others' lives could be much better with some small adaptations. A few small changes can make a big difference in your life. That kind of benefit. So Jane Kesey does this for educators all the time in her doable differentiation book. It's 12 strategies and it's all about simple, easy things educators can do so they can reach all kinds of students. Or Cindy, who's listening here, she uses this great quote about steering ships in her stuff to demonstrate this point. This idea that small changes can have massive impact on your life. And that's what I'm talking about by core benefits. That kind of basic core benefit of what's the benefit of knowing all about type? I mean, for me, it's fun and it's exciting and it's cool, but there's actual real benefits in your life that come from this. And if people are seeing benefits in their life, then a lot of the objections never even come up because to them it's useful. So there, get people to buy into the core benefits as early as possible. So I'm now going to go through a variety of the core objections that I did in the poll and give you some specific tips to overcome those objections, to implement those 2 key secrets so that they never come up. So first, I'm going to start with them. I think I am both or I'm an ambivert. This one is a very frequent objection, although not the most frustrating. So I think this is especially common when you're seeing results that show the 4 preference scales. Right? So this would be an EI, SN scale, and you've got a number on it. I think that really tends to lead people to this conclusion. So therefore, it becomes easy to mistakenly, that's the problem, they mistakenly believe the results and the type code, like it says E, so that means you're an E, and therefore you never hide I moments. They mistakenly interpret the results or the type code. Or you are a T, and you make decisions with logic and not emotions. So those of us who know type know this is not what the type code means, but that's what they're interpreting. So I like to use this one right out of the box. We often use the left and right handedness metaphor, but I add 2 key modifications to make sure I'm overcoming objections. So the first is I always describe something like this. Of course, when carrying a heavy box, you use both hands. Everyone goes, yes. So then I will go, or when doing a difficult job, you will use both or all preferences. And most people get that. But I definitely find I have to specifically include this part of the metaphor. Otherwise, people come up with that objection. The second part, when I'm suggesting you use light or left-handed, I suggest that if you have to use an offhand scissors, it's harder, it's more difficult. And we want them to understand that while you can use the wrong tool, an offhand scissors or mouse, it will not feel good, which is a great metaphor for type. You can use something that isn't your preference, but it feels just awkward, but you can do it. And a small adaptation is worth the benefits you get. It is probably worth the extra effort to buy a left-handed scissors or a left-handed mouse. It's a small adaptation that provides benefits. And a company can do the same thing based upon the metaphor of type. It's worth it for a team to make small adaptations for their team members. So I find that using these two metaphors, both the box with left-handedness and then using that scissors or a computer mice, are both really powerful in leading the left-right-handed metaphor to where we want them to take it. That's the trick. Not just that they got the metaphor, but that the metaphor extends to defeating the objections. All right. Activities that engage more than one type help with this as well. This is effectively the yes and game. You don't deny the objection, I am both. Instead, you encourage it appropriately. So for example, interaction styles, you can say, oh, you have an interaction styles you prefer, and when do you use the other styles? When is it appropriate to use the other styles? Which is a great way to leverage interaction styles. Or when you're talking about temperament, here's a good example. Okay, pick 3 stressors from your temperament and go ahead and pick 2 stressors from a temperament that are for you personally from the other temperaments. So you're leveraging this idea that they do have a preference, but there's nothing wrong with them seeing some comfort or some connection with the other types. Another way to do that is to show values that imply you have all of them in you. So in our software, after they've done a bunch of self-discovery activities, we show a vote tally for all 16 types. So therefore, so they might say, so this would be for an ENFP, and they go, okay, got it. So there's a vote tally, and they can see they have a number. So there's a part of them uniquely that has some connection to each of the different types. Or you can present a model that shows how everyone is both. This is our visual type. I presented this in OZAPT and BAPT previously. It's the 8 union functions. I'm not going to go into in detail now. You can go see on my other talks, or we also have links on our site about this. But it uses the 8 functions, and it shows how a person is all 8. So if you looked at Cash Key's presentation yesterday, where he talks about how everybody has all 8, this is really backed up, or Mina's, by a lot of the great research. And so we find that when we present people type this way with visual type, that we never get the objections of I am both, but I'm ambivert, because it's obvious they're both. Of course, you're both extrovert and introverted. You're both thinking and feeling. You're all of them. All right. Second objection. Don't put me in a box, or don't stereotype me. So say it early in your presentation. Everyone is unique. I just say that, literally. It's one of my first phrases I say in my presentations. I just say it. And if you feel like that's not strong enough, you can go into, and it is still useful to have categories. Categories are typically very useful for day-to-day use. Richard talked about this some, about ipsative versus other contexts. But if you want to describe it using that left and right metaphor, you can talk about it this way. You can say it is more accurate if you want to say you are left 75, right 64. However, most of the time that's not super useful. What they really want to know is, could I have a left-handed scissors? Right? So categories are useful. You can certainly specify exactly what kind of paper for your printer, bond, weight, exact shade of weight for the printer, but most often when you're out of paper, you want white laser printer. And so this idea of categories being bad is completely counter to how we use categories almost through most of our life. Another way is to point out the differences between preference and skill development. Using the left and right hand metaphor, saying someone is left-handed doesn't describe how well they use their left hand or what task they are good at with their left hand. For many reasons, a person might develop specific skills with their offhand. Has anybody, just raise your hand in the video, ever broken an arm or a hand? I have. Yep. Yeah, it turns out you get reasonably not as terrible with your offhand when that happens. Another way to do this is like with Linda Behrens does, is point out the difference between preference, development, and behavior. There's a core self, which we're trying to talk about, but then you also have a developed and contextual self. So you're not going to be very stereotyped by the time you get through all those. You can also customize the descriptions as an activity. I know some people in the type community have done this. So it's asked them to take out their book with their type description and go through and use a highlighter and underline the statements that are very true for them, or go through and use a red highlighter or strike through statements that are not true for them. Just in the video by show of hands, has anybody done that with their people ever? Yep, I see some hands going up. This is a great way to get people in the, oh, I get to customize this and make it mine. We've gone to a lot of trouble in our software to make it so that people can customize all of their reports the same way. So a person can just highlight the stuff in their reports and highlight what's true, strike through what's not true for them, add tasks or add comments. So we wanted to make it so that your online reports felt the same way you could do that with a physical report. So we encourage that. And we find this really helps people buy into their type when they can eliminate that one sentence that felt wrong to them. But then everything, like it's 99% correct, but there's one sentence that bothers them. Great, move on. So another way that we do that is we allow people to personalize their own visual type in our software. I've done this at a BAPT conference before. You can do this in person, just have them sit there with markers, crayons, and a piece of paper, and have them literally draw how big they think their functions are. This is an activity people like. It's a lot of fun. It's very colorful. And then you can ask them to talk to each other about why their boxes are the way the size they are. And that activity could go like half a day if you want to let it, because it's basically all about them. But we also brought the same thing into our software so that people can dynamically save their visual type to indicate how they see their usage of the 8 functions. We give them control to decide exactly what that is and then save it. So they've now personalized their type. From the previous objections, something we can bring forward is that what we've noticed is by showing things like this vote tally, these is 2 ENFPs, both with 2 different vote tallies. Both of them came up with their #1 pattern being ENFP, but you can see their numbers are different. And we find that people look at this and go, ah, you captured that I'm unique. People look at this and they naturally then get, oh, I get it. I'm not the same as this other ENFP. And we're both ENFPs, but we're not the same. And we feel like that really helps people just avoid the objection completely. So next objection. It got me wrong. There are sentences I don't agree with. So I often do this right away. No assessment or self-discovery is 100% accurate, which is why we do verification. Everyone is unique, and so no description will be perfect. So you can basically solve the previous objection in this one by just telling people, yep, it's okay to be unique. So I often will focus on the usefulness. This is where the core benefit comes in. I might tell people we're trying to find descriptions useful most of the time. If I can provide communication tips to others based on your type that makes communication 10% easier, that makes your life easier, would that be useful? And then people go, oh yes, that would be good. So or another way to say is we're trying to find the type that has the most useful strategies for you. This also sets up that answer to so what. So you're pointing out that perfection isn't the goal, instead usefulness is the goal. From the previous objections, also the customizing their type descriptions and building their own visual type also both helped them to deal with this, that the type description wasn't perfect. All right. It's just astrology, or the Barnum effect. For those in psychology, it's also called the Forer effect, if you want to get technically, but that's, for those who don't know, that's when people think the description is a good description of them when it's actually the same description given to everyone. So it's just generically good things. Anybody's familiar with The Secret? It's basically the I am both descriptions. You like talking with your friends, and sometimes you need privacy. You've just described everyone. So all the tips in a later section I'm going to get to, called the core benefit tips, apply to this. But really, I want to talk to you about what I think is the underlying goal here to beat this, which is to get them to types are not the same. That's effectively what the Forer effect is. They're exactly the same types, but we know the types are not the same. They're very different. So we're trying to get to anything, any kind of activity or example that gets them to see that types represent real differences in people, different attitudes, different ways of perceiving, different ways of judging. Anything that gets them to this wins against this objection. So anytime they can hear two very different people, like you're doing a team activity, talking about their different types, then that's often where people then get that visceral, oh, these are different people. Part of the point of any group activity is to showcase and hear other types talk. So if you can get to that, that's great. Hearing people in their own words can really have a great effect. Having people speak out from each of the type-alike groups. After hearing these two different groups, do you think they are the same? And then that's where people start to go, oh yeah, they're not the same. You overcome this objection anytime you get to, that is not me. So ways to do that. In a book with their type descriptions, ask them to read their opposite type and compare. You want them to start reading that opposite type and go, oh my God, that is not me. How can anybody live like that? And the second you get to that, you've already won this objection. Tends to work better with the 16-hole types. The sole activities are inferior to dominant cognitive functions. So interaction styles and essential motivators with Linda Behrens, there is some cross-pollination between even opposite quote-unquote types. So I'd be careful about doing opposites with those, but it's great with the 16-hole types or the cognitive functions. Another one is rank these stressors. And then realize, especially if you're comparing the stressors of dominant and inferior functions, that literally the things that stress you out are the things that other people love. And the things that they love, that stress them out, are the things that you like. Oh my, I had no idea people actually enjoyed that. So this is, I find, a great way to get people to identify that that's not me. I know both Susan Ash and Jane Kesey and many other experts literally start their introductions with activities that are basically designed for this exact purpose. It's get to the idea that people go, oh, this is me, and oh my God, that's not me over there. Those people over there are not part of my universe, or I don't understand them, or anything like that. Is actually a massive step forward. All right, so this doesn't help me, or type doesn't matter. Man, this is an annoying objection. So I actually place it right literally in my agenda or table of contents. So I literally say, we're going to talk at this part of the agenda on why you should care. Or I might say in the agenda, we're going to cover 3 key areas to improve by using type. And I expressly tell them about how type helps them. So I do that as early in the talk as possible so that they know I'm going to, at least at some point, get to the objections. So I like to, so as quickly as possible, tell them you will have so what's sometime later. It will not all be just theory. Or if they've made the objection and you haven't covered that, acknowledge their point. Yeah, you're right. If all we did was just talk a theory, then this wouldn't be valuable use of your time. We're going to get to how you can use it later. By the way, this is always a great strategy. Acknowledge their point. I am both. You're exactly right. And that's how most people feel, or whatever. Right? If you acknowledge their point, they're now willing to listen to you. So I find it best to provide easy to use tips for their day-to-day life. So anything that can be very pragmatic and useful right away can do that. And as a big tip, I like to focus on tips that require just knowing yourself. So you don't need to know the other person's type to implement the tip. So for example, if you have extroversion, then you can maximize your effectiveness in communication by stopping and listening more. Note, I don't have to know the other person's type to know that as a tip about myself. I have extroversion preferences. I should stop and listen more. Or let there be space after someone talks to make sure they've completed their thoughts. Those are any tip that doesn't require them to know other people's type, and they can just know themselves and know how to be more effective is going to do that. That's the whole point of Jane Kesey's doable differentiation for teachers. Teachers in a classroom cannot modify their style easily for the unique, every single 16 types that's in their classroom. So they have to use strategies that takes advantage of broader tips. One of the things that we recommend doing is doing initial self-discovery activities for best fit that actually cover some of the benefits. For example, if you're sorting cards about what stresses you, you immediately understand this is about stress. If you're sorting cards about how you prefer to be talked to, about how you prefer to be interacted with, then you know this is a model that covers that benefit. You didn't have to explain it. They're just literally doing this. So performing these activities, then they already have an idea of so what. So we do that in our online software when people are doing self-discovery. We intentionally have them do like ranking activities on what these 4 stressors most stress you. And now they know that this thing we're talking about has something to do with what stresses me out. So they have a connection between what we're doing and where it might apply in the world. Early, easy wins. The sooner you get to answering the so what, the faster and easier we win converts to type. We have to give them actionable, easy wins. Once they like the benefits of type, then it is easier to get them to dive more into the models and the theory. I'll talk about this more. So there's lots of great examples of so what already in the community. For example, Sue Blair and Marianne Sutherland have this amazing set of cards on types and learning for educators, students, and parents. It's incredible. It even has wonderful things on specific learning circumstances, like how type interacts with ADD and other things. It's just incredible. There's at this conference, there's talks on this. Kara Linden is talking about being effective with techies, right? There's a lot of so what I'm anticipating, you know, and same with Suzanne Brew. Like the more you can claim, you can link type to where it matters in the real world, the more likely you get lots of buy-in. So now some broader tips to implementing those core benefits of type. These tips are all about helping people see and get the core benefits of type most easily. So I often internally think of this as getting people to appreciate mental diversity. Gifts differing. I'm not crazy, I'm just not you. One way I visualize the success on this is getting to realize they would prefer others to do this tip for them. People are naturally somewhat self-focused. So if you can get them to realize that, oh boy, yeah, I sure would like it if people gave me more space in my office and barge into my office. If you can just get them to that, then they've already seen the value in type. So a good example is you work with preference pairs. Do ideas, activities that highlight the preference pairs, now they work. I think E&I is typically very obvious for people to see, and there's lots of easy and powerful tips. So you don't have to give tips for all the preference pairs. If you simply did E&I early on, you're probably going to get past a lot of the objections. And furthermore, use whichever combinations work for your group. Some people like to use the last 2 conflict pairs, the last 2 letters, sometimes referred to as conflict pairs, the first 2 letters quadrants. I love using first and last letters. I often refer to that as engagement styles because EI and JP together are easy to see in the outside world. I put them in type-alike groups. So 4 groups, I say, describe your ideal workspace. And based upon EI and JP, I mean, it just becomes, it's so physical, it seems more real and more concrete. And it's easy for people to grasp, oh my goodness. And those opposite groups seem very alien. The office space EPs want looks nothing like the office space an IJ wants, broadly. And furthermore, you do not need 4-letter type to deliver those core benefits. You can get to that core benefit without it. So one way is to just start with essential motivators. They address core needs, and so it can seem very powerful to people. I know Eve DeLunas really focuses on the stress and the survival games, and you can talk to people and they can get to the core benefits of type, having never learned the 16 types. Interaction styles is very effective, tends to be very visible, and hence easier for people to learn and use. And it teaches people how to manage which energy they're using. Catherine Stothartz has some great books and cards. This is the tips for me for my engagement, which is Energizer or Get Things Going. And so note, I don't have to know anybody else's interaction style. I only need to know my interaction style. And there's tips here on things I can do to be more effective. Again, I don't need to memorize anybody else's type. I can use type immediately to get the benefits. I like talking about the dominant function as a way to just use that. I often like to refer to it as a superpower. So it's something valuable and easy to use, and overuse of your dominant function can cause problems. If all you taught people how to do was moderate use of their dominant function, you would make the world a better place. If the only skill people got was just that, they and the people around them win a better life. You can use cognitive functions. Both Cash Key with his leader type cards and Cindy Paris have used their cards to introduce people to union type without 4-letter type. So you don't not need 4-letter type to do this. I also like to use cognitive functions, and we extend that with the Z process. So we built a bunch of forms that work through work-related questions for each of the 8 functions. So people can see work valuable questions related to each of the 8 functions. So we teach people type with the 8 functions and how they all have value. So it's key work questions for each one of those 8 functions. So now we're going to do a 2 secrets activity. So we're going to break into groups of 3 for 6 minutes. And in your group, each person, I want you to pick an objection from earlier, either one we've covered or one from the list. And you're going to talk about a tip you already use or suggest a new idea to address it. And feel free to help each other make that tip better. So the 3 of you are going to work on some good tips around either an existing objection or one of the ones in the chat. And when we get back together, I'll ask for volunteers to share standout suggestions from their group. Before we go into groups, does anybody have any question about this activity? Go ahead and mute yourself to maybe ask the question if you need to. All right. All right, Richard. So if I can have you put everybody into groups. So groups of 3, and pick an objection and work on your tips for that.
Okay, just setting this up. So,
all right, great.
You can either go for 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. There's that kind of.
I'd probably go 3 to 4 instead of 2 to 3.
Okay. Okay, 3 to 4. Random rooms. Here we go. You'll have to click when it invites you to go into
go ahead
the
and
room.
Accept.
Okay. Open all rooms. Let's put a 10-minute timer on it, but we can end sooner if you want.
I've got a timer going. You said you put a timer on it?
It's got a 10-minute timer by default.
We'll end it sooner. I'm running a timer. Okay, so do I have some volunteers to make some suggestions from what their tips were? I'm really excited to hear what people are going to came up with in their groups.
So I was volunteered. so here I am. In our group number 1, we picked I'm an ambivert because it drives me insane. And it seems it just drives me nuts. So we talked about a lot of stuff. Jim, who was in the group, said just the activities of, you can't even see my arms. And Angelina talked about this the other day, crossing them one way and then the other way. It helps us see that we engage both. We talked about the breathing exercise that I did in my session where, people have to take a breath in, and then if you don't give them direction, they're like, oh, you have to breathe out. And now try breathing out without breathing in. You can't do it. So you move back and forth through the E and I.
Yes.
Yeah, Jim also mentioned the step 2 really helps, the facets, to show that you can be out of preference.
Yep. That is a great benefit of the step 2. Agree, completely agree.
Yep.
Excellent. Do we have another volunteer with some suggestions from their group?
I had an objection that I shared with my group. It is the one about people saying, well, I'm not the same type throughout life, I change. What I normally tell them is, of course you change, but if we ask Jung, he would say that you actually have the same type throughout life, but the way you're using it and the way that you're developing it will change. And Molly had a great example in the slide that she uses. Molly, I don't know if you would like to tell about the example that you, about the sunflower. Just, you unmuted, sorry.
I use a slide that shows the stages of the growth of a sunflower from a seed to a seedling and then to a couple of stages in height before there is full bloom. And I talk about being the same at the core essence. And that in the same way, I changed, that I was different at 2 than I am was at 20, than I was at 40. And that if I could maintain my core of who I was, but if I didn't change and still acted like a 2-year-old, that would be, you know, not good.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Some additional ones? Any other suggestions from your groups?
Yeah,
Go
I could share from our group. We had about this with the inboxing.
Mm.
And my favorite metaphor for that, or exercise for that, is this type house. I don't know if you recognize that. You live in this house with 16 rooms and you have your favorite room. Well, of course, you can move around in your house in the different rooms. Mm-hmm. And you can do that freely, actually. And from every room, and when you look out of the window, you actually have a different angle and you see different things. And you can do that freely any time. Mostly you will return to your favorite room where you feel more relaxed and you have energy and so forth. So I think in group settings, it's an excellent way of make it is kind of easy to understand that you can actually flex your type frequently. Yes. And for some days, you actually don't want to go to another room, so you will stay in your own room for a while. So,
over the last year, I think there's definitely been some days where people did not want to leave the bedroom.
Precisely.
Great, wonderful. Let's do one more suggestion from a volunteer.
Go ahead, Josh.
Okay, sure. We had a point about being frustrated with the comparison with astrology, because Myers-Briggs, it's taking, you've got like a set of characteristics, and how you align with the characteristics determines what your type is, rather than you're born on this specific date, so you have these characteristics.
Yep. That was fast. Shauna, let's squeeze one more in. Go for it, Shauna.
Sure. I had the pleasure of actually being connected just one-on-one with Carol, and I had just finished watching her attending her Type and Techie. So anybody that hasn't, I really encourage that one. Our topic was it's just not real. And so she has a slew of topics or tips for that. But the couple that really stuck out to me that she shared was referring to the stats, like actually physically, tangibly taking the stats booklet. There we go. Linda's holding it up. Into one of your sessions and just referring to it, saying, okay, on page such and such and such and such, these are the stats for anybody that wants to. You can take a look at it at the break. So then it acknowledges it. They can go there, and she says nobody ever does, but just them knowing it helps. And then, of course, referring to Dario Nardi's brain scans and a lot of his research that kind of brings the science and overlays it to this model of type. So again, if you didn't get a chance to watch hers, I highly recommend it. There was lots of just really tangible tips as well on that specific topic for techies.
Yep. I think that's such a great example of it. Turns out if you bring it up, you own the conversation, right? There's a lot of power in you as the presenter framing things in a way you want to set it up. And I think that example of almost nobody checks the book, right? Once you actually framed it up and you get it ready for them, then you've actually in many ways defeated the objection in a lot of ways before they even come up, even without having to provide all the answers. For example, no, of course, each person is unique. Just framing that in advance. You don't need to go into lots of explanations. We gave you some tips, but often you never even need them because just framing it from the beginning solves the problem. That's such a great point. So I'm going to keep going. now with the remainder of what we're doing. All right, and more chat. There we go. So in conclusion, implementing the tips. Address objections before they come up, especially when you bring it up, you own it. And then focus on the core benefits. If you're achieving either of these two things, and ideally both, you will overcome many, many objections to type before they ever even become a problem. And really, this is about transforming objections, right? Instead of questioning the point, which is what they're doing when they start, we want them asking questions about how to use type better. Those are the fun questions. That's when it's great. Hey, I like this type stuff. How do I use that in this circumstance? So I think we want to transform their objections and that curiosity and those questions into something else. Yeah, all right. So here I'm going to introduce some of my philosophy about how to best, we might best take advantage of this. So if you are done and they only take away one useful part that improves their lives, just one, so then you succeeded. We succeeded as type experts if all they did is took away one thing to improve their life. Don't let the success bar be everyone knows, remembers, and uses their 4-letter type. We can't let that be the success bar. There's a good example of the book Curse of Knowledge, it coming from the book Made to Stick. And what they talk about is that the more an expert knows, the more that for them, we want them to know everything, because from our perspective, everything does contribute value. All of our knowledge about type is valuable. And for us, it is valuable. And so I'm so excited to share it all with them. But it turns out what most beginners don't need is everything. Beginners need just enough. And I think we would do well to do more and more of that in how we introduce people to type, is to do just enough. Maybe just the basic idea, I'm not crazy, I'm just not you, right? If we can get them to that. Or my coworkers may not be trying to make me mad. If they can simply get that realization, we're winning. I love the 4 agreements. The agreement number 2 is about not taking things personally, or to take things less personally. In other words, what people do is about them, not about you. What your coworkers are doing at work is probably about their type, not about you. And that helps depersonalize a lot of conflict. So maybe they forget the rest of the letters. Maybe they forget the entire model, but they remember E and I, and they prefer extroversion and some tips on how to do things in meetings to communicate in ways that help those who prefer introversion. Their lives are now improved, both theirs and the people they had meetings with, and you did that. Like, that's success. It is worth people's while to give people easy, small adaptations they can learn during their introduction to type. That what we find is that the more they constantly see easy, small, quick wins with type, with each win we give them with type, it gets easier to lead them further down the road. Because now it's a good road. It's a great road. And now they can't wait to see what's down the hill and over the hill. The sooner we get to answering, so what? How does this help? The faster and easier we win converts to type. I have NT preferences. I love the theory. I can't wait to communicate the theory. I have to tell myself, stop that, Sterling. Instead, focus on what's going to win converts to type. I'm going to use a TV show metaphor. If someone tells you, by the way, I love this TV show, it's amazing. The first 2 seasons are terrible, and you have to kind of force yourself to watch through them, but the 3rd season is amazing. How many people will now watch that TV show? Not very many people. So I often frame it this way: save the hard stuff for later. So memorizing all the models, all the type names or codes, or what to do with each type, and which person is which type, that's hard stuff. Even as an expert, I don't always remember the tips I'm supposed to do if I'm having a tough discussion with a coworker. But the TV show metaphor, if we can make the first couple of seasons good enough so that they pay attention long enough to get to the really good stuff in Jung and all of the wonderful psychological types, man, we've won. But we need to make those first couple of seasons good enough. So if after we are done, they only take away one useful part, we all succeed. So a bonus for you. We're interested in defeating the bad stuff on the internet. Online free sites create more objections for us. You may be familiar with this. Some of you, if you just watch the social media conversation, you're going to have lots of insight into this. So a good example is 16 Personalities. Has no transparency. Nobody takes responsibility. There's no review and feedback from the APT or MBTI community. It isn't trying to solve objections or teach people. In fact, all the research indicates that what they're trying to do is take data on people and sell it. They're a data scamming company. So introducing Personality Wizard. I and the people I work with have created a website that's does best fit and verification totally free online. It's the best way we could take software to do best fit and verification. So we're putting every trick and tip at our disposal to overcome objections in advance in the software. Help people get to the core benefit and enjoy and appreciate the power of type in an ethical way. Integrating our community experts. So why is it free? Well, first of all, we have to compete with the existing free. There are lots of young people with no money and they're not willing to spend it yet. We want to lead them down an ethical journey to type, not a bad journey to type. We must go where they are. Second of all, there's a long and glorious history of helping humanity with free. In 1923, Dr. Frederick Banting won the Nobel Prize for insulin and they gave the patent away. Dr. Salk invented the polio vaccine. In 1954, he was told he could make a ton of money. And he said, no, this is the property of humanity. His phrase was, you can't patent the sun. Niels Bohlin, the engineer at Volvo, invented the three-point seatbelt in 1959. They gave it away to all the other car companies because of safety. Elon Musk recently gave away all the patents to the electric cars, and Toyota agreed and followed suit with another 5,000 patents. There's a glorious history of helping humanity with free. And I think type can be there. So Personality Wizard is our answer to Rob Toomey's talk, which is how do we connect the knowledge and power of type to millions of curious amateurs? So we've created a website called Personality Wizard. It's free self-discovery and best fit process, and it's available free to anyone on the internet. And we have encouraged the community to participate. So we have content for more than a dozen authors participating, and it's all about helping people to learn to love type by experiencing it in new ways. Here's an example of some of the authors engaged in this software. You might recognize one or two speakers in this, at this conference, and by that I mean a number of them, who are engaged as experts on this particular software. So we've really engaged the community as, and this is only the start. We plan to get more authors as well. And so we want to bring the best of the APT community all together where we can create something that's software that other people can just learn to discover type like we do, the way we love it. So, questions? I get some thumbs up. Excellent.
Yeah.
Lots of thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to say something. Judy McLaren, ESFP, San Francisco Bay Area. Amen, brother. Thank you for creating the free tool.
Thank you.
Because I think the free tool is really, I think, the gateway so many people access type. And just talking from the prior session with Teresa Moon, I believe.
Yes.
And I had no idea personality, 16personalities.com was actually Big Five masquerading as MBTI.
Yes, it is.
So unbelievable. So this is great. And believe me, we will do whatever we can to promote. I will do whatever I can to promote this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's an interesting, fun story. You can actually answer no questions on going through the 16 Personalities website. Like, you choose no answers, hit next, and it will give you a type with scores. Yeah, so if that tells you how accurate it is, there you go.
They also have like a T or an A associated with a type, like either aggressive or I don't know what it stands for.
Oh, okay. Oh, Kevin is saying you can't do that anymore. Okay, thank you. At one point you could, like up to like literally like a couple of months ago.
It was interesting about that you mentioned the data scanning from this. So that is the whole business idea about this.
Yep, they're selling the data.
Yeah. So horrible, but understandable.
Yep. So yeah, we wanted something that had transparency and authenticity to people. We want them to get excited. So we celebrate in our software, we celebrate all these wonderful contributors, you know, tell people where the writing came from and who wrote it. So we wanted to go do that. So we please help us by spreading the word. And when people are interested, go through it yourself and take a look and enjoy it. And hopefully you'll have a lot of fun. Wonderful. We are over time. I'm happy to stay and answer questions. So long as Richard, you're willing to don't mind us staying here.
Yeah, I'd say thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now so we can have a more free discussion.